we've looked at Indonesia and identified it as one of the countries where the move to a low-carbon economy can make the biggest contribution to the quality of lives of Indonesia, as well as contribute to the global public good of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So for us and a number of development partners of Indonesia, this is a very exciting country to work in.
Indonesia is one of the only countries in the world that's actually legislated corporate social responsibility. And I think a lot of corporates get confused as to what sustainability is and what corporate CSR is. And so they haven't stood back and said, oh, okay, this has to be sustainable, this has to be low carbon. They haven't really thought that one through yet.
If you want to be considered as sustainable business, then please consider of having a well-balanced business activity between economy, environment, and social. If you consider the three aspects, then you are considered as a sustainable business. But of course, we have to look further to the regulations. What is the local regulation sets about sustainability criteria? And the other is what is international organization standards for sustainability criteria.
And these are standards which are made in conjunction by the buyers, the sellers, the producers of palm oil. So the banks obviously have then jumped on them and said, look, we want to use those as well. But it's here that now this whole mindset has to still change, because people see them as an imposition from foreigners rather than something that might help the industry in the long run.
Well, in 2005, when you looked at the Indonesian market, there wasn't a lot of knowledge of CDM. And in fact, if you look today, where we are, what is now 6 years later, there's only about 36 projects that have actually gone and got registered. And I think the biggest problems is that the lack of knowledge within the private businesses that haven't really been comfortable with this whole CDM process. So you've got developers that have come in, have helped the private industries to go and get their CERs registered. But again, it hasn't had a proper financing mechanism with the banks. But I think going forward, you're seeing increasing the amount of new traders coming into Indonesia and encouraging the buying of CERs going forward.
On the banking side, I think there needs to be more education in terms of, accepting carbon emissions as a source of funding, and treat it as such that will enhance the return of the project, and recognize it as a, from a risk factor point of view, whether that, the certainty and it needs to be more clarity on that, because having a 2-year process on having it registered and validated does not help having a certainty on the project. If it could be made shorter, like 6 to 12 months, I think that would help the banks understanding it much better.
We have two types of investors here: strategic investors and financial investors. These strategic already have long time horizons. This financial is medium-term horizons. So we're sort of combining the two, because the biggest fund come from the financial investors that unfortunately now only have a medium time horizons.
I'm not so sure where the short-term view comes from. I don't think it's necessarily driven by bank requirements. It might be also part of the local nature and view on how to invest and how to make money.
We're not looking for charity, but we're looking for the kind of support that the Chinese government gives in making clean energy, in utilizing carbon credits as products that their companies can get involved in business. And we don't really have that kind of support here. We don't have the investors with long visions, long-term visions and patience to work with us and get their money back with fairly good returns. But it will take time.
It's not up to the banks to go to potential borrowers and say, why don't you take a 10-year view instead of a 2-year view? Here's a project for you and we will finance it. It's more that the investors themselves need to get warm for projects that have such long time horizons rather than try to make the quick buck.
SMEs have very little status. Even the banks don't really know how to deal. They're starting to figure it out, but there's not any really serious SME banking here. So that is an issue, and I don't think government gets that.
I believe that in the small, medium enterprise businesses that the government up to now has not really prioritized because they've had a number of other issues, perhaps bigger issues, going from a country that was under the old regime or the old order into the new order where there's a democracy. And I think we'll see increasingly banks taking a view that this industry is very important.
The best examples of low-carbon strategies in this country are the smaller to medium-sized businesses. Most of them already get it. And you see whole communities in Java that are living a low-carbon, sustainable life. And the small businesses there act that way.
So one of the projects that IFC is running in Indonesia is based on our experience in China and Russia. And we're working with banks in Indonesia to help them provide finance to their SME customers for energy efficiency investments. Now, the customers may not know about these energy efficiency investments, but we help train the banks and introduce environmental service companies, again SMEs, to explain the technology about boilers to convert waste to energy, about lighting and insulation in small factories. All of these investments reduce the cost of SMEs, so they like it. It's good business for the banks to help their customers grow with profitable loans for the banks. And we build the capacity, both of the banks and the customers, to help move this sector towards low-carbon growth.
It's not enough for a country of 250 million people. We need to, and we can do, and we need to do more. So we need to hear more success stories. And I think we also have a disproportionately small portion of what we can tap in terms of green energy, carbon funding for projects in Indonesia as compared to China and India, for instance.
If we were in China, the government and the businesses get it, because I truly believe that China understands the economic drive to going green, and they've bought into the whole idea of clean tech. But here in Indonesia, that's not quite the case yet.
As successful projects develop internationally, feeding into banks' confidence that these are viable projects to finance, I see no reason why that shouldn't spill over to the Indonesian market.
There are three major challenges. The first is lack of information and awareness amongst the stakeholders about the benefits. The second is there is some regulatory overlap and conflicts in certain sectors. And third and finally, there's the challenge of getting things done in Indonesia and stakeholders coming together for a common objective.
It has been truly difficult for us to convince different stakeholders, the business community, that this is something that we need to take seriously, and that the cost will justify in the long run. This is the biggest challenge, because it's in the long run, whereby profit targets are short-term vision in nature. The skeptics are saying it's too costly. It's too costly. We still need to grow. We still need to play catch up. And it's exactly this vision that has placed us where we are today. The environmental degradation is just indescribable, right? So it has been very difficult to prove. But I think now there's more awareness that this cannot continue. And we're getting a lot more people on board on this. And BNI is pretty much prepared because we have been putting our frameworks in place for more than 3 years ago, and getting our first stakeholder, which is the employees, already on board on this one.
I do think generational change will have a big impact in this country, because I can actually think off the top of my head 3 companies with the older generation running them right now, and when you meet the younger generation, they have very different ideas about how they would run them in the future and what they should be focusing on.
This Kyoto Protocol has given us an opportunity to live our entrepreneurial value of doing something good for the environment, to use our thermal engineering expertise and put into the business model so that we can do good for the environment, make some money, access some finance, pay back in a few years' time. That's so they become a cash-generating asset.
This country is still in development, although the economy is growing very fast. If you're in the government, there's a lot of balls that you're juggling, and this is just one of them. So in this discussion we might prioritize the low-carbon economy, but in the next one it might be something else. So at the end of the day, choices need to be made, and I'm sure in those decision-making processes there is a long-term view that plays, but how long is long? Is that then again the next election?
So what we see in Indonesia, and we've seen this in other countries, is that there are big opportunities for the banks in Indonesia to offer these products to their customers, make more money in an increasingly competitive environment in Indonesia. Credit officers, account managers need to be more entrepreneurial.
One of the interesting things about business in Indonesia is everyone copies those successful businesses. So if one makes it happen, makes lots of money, the whole country will shift.